Okay, so you sent over this research about how teachers think about knowledge itself, and I gotta say, it's like a whole new layer of the education onion.
Right.
And it got me thinking, like how does what a teacher believes about knowledge impact what happens in their classroom, and more importantly, how we learn as students?
That's a great question.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into this. We're going to be talking about things like epistemic cognition,
Mm,
epistemic beliefs,
right.
and even something called calibration.
Right, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, and all of these are basically ways of looking at how teachers' understanding of knowledge itself shapes their teaching.
And it has huge implications for learning.
So let's jump right in. First things first, what is epistemic cognition? Like, how would you explain that to someone who's, never heard of it before?
Sure. So imagine a teacher is, let's say, teaching history,
Okay.
and they're looking at different accounts of a historical event. Maybe
Yeah.
they've got like a primary source document
Yeah.
and then a textbook that talks about the same event.
Okay, I see.
Epistemic cognition is all the mental processes that the teacher uses to evaluate those sources.
Like figuring out which one to believe, right?
Exactly, yeah. Like, okay, who wrote this document? What was their perspective? What was going on at the time? Are there any biases we need to be aware of? It's the thinking about how we know what we know.
So it's not just about knowing the facts, it's about thinking critically about where those facts come from.
Yeah, it's the thinking in action. Like, how do we decide what's true, especially when we have conflicting information?
That makes a lot of sense. So that's epistemic cognition. Now, what about epistemic beliefs? Is that the same thing or is it different?
It's related, but it's more about the teacher's kind of overall philosophy of knowledge.
So less about a specific situation and more about their general worldview, right?
Yeah, like their big picture beliefs about knowledge itself.
Okay.
Like, do they believe that knowledge is fixed and absolute?
Hmm.
Or do they see it as something that's constantly evolving? Do they think about knowledge as like a bunch of separate facts?
Yeah.
Or as a network of interconnected ideas?
Uh-huh.
And where does knowledge come from?
Okay. Yeah.
Does it come from authority figures like teachers and textbooks?
Right.
Or is it something that learners construct for themselves?
So it's kind of like a lens through which they view the world and how we learn.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, like those beliefs shape how they approach teaching and learning.
That makes total sense. And then we have calibration. I feel like this one's a little bit different.
It is. Calibration is about how well teachers understand their own knowledge.
Like how much they know.
Kind of. It's more about how accurately they can judge what they know and what they don't know.
So self-awareness of their own knowledge, basically.
Precisely. And that's really important because it impacts how they teach.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say a student asks a question that the teacher isn't totally sure about. A well-calibrated teacher will recognize that they don't have all the answers and maybe say something like, "That's a great question. Let's look into that together."
Right.
But a teacher who's not as well-calibrated might try to bluff their way through it,
Which could lead to some misinformation being spread.
or they might avoid the question altogether, which isn't great either.
So calibration is about being honest with yourself and your students about the limits of your knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this ties together.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, but I think some of our listeners might be wondering why this matters to them. Like why should someone who's not a teacher care about all this?
Well, everyone's a learner in some way, right?
That's true.
We're constantly learning new things, whether it's like a new skill
Yeah.
or trying to understand a news article.
Or just navigating life in general.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
understanding how teachers view knowledge can actually make you a more effective learner.
How so?
Well, because when you start to recognize that different people have different beliefs about what knowledge is and how we learn,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to critically evaluate the information you're getting.
So it's about being more aware of the biases and assumptions that might be shaping how information is presented to us.
Exactly. Like, is this source presenting something as an absolute truth? Or is it more of an interpretation? Understanding these nuances can really help you learn more effectively.
That's really interesting. So it's not just about teachers and students. It's about how we all approach learning and knowledge in general.
Absolutely.
All right, now that we've got the basics down, let's dive into what the research actually tells us. You mentioned earlier that teachers have different perspectives on knowledge.
Right. And one of the really big distinctions is between seeing knowledge as something that's discovered.
Discover.
Yeah, like it's out there in the world waiting to be found.
Okay.
and seeing knowledge as something that's constructed.
Constructed. So, like, we build our own understanding.
Exactly. And those two perspectives lead to very different approaches to teaching.
Can you give me some examples of how those different views might play out in a classroom?
Sure. So let's take a science teacher who believes that scientific knowledge is discovered.
Okay.
They might emphasize memorizing facts and formulas.
Because those are seen as the unchanging truths of science, right?
Right. Their labs might be all about confirming those pre-established facts.
So it's more about verification than exploration.
Yeah, the student's role is to absorb the correct information.
Mm-hmm.
Now compare that to a science teacher who sees knowledge as constructed.
Okay.
They're more likely to use inquiry-based learning.
Where students are actively involved in figuring things out for themselves.
Exactly. Their labs might be more open-ended, where students are encouraged to come up with their own hypotheses.
And maybe even challenge existing theories.
Yeah, it's more about the process of scientific thinking than getting the right answer.
That's a really interesting contrast.
And you see similar patterns in other subjects, like history.
How so?
Well, a history teacher who sees knowledge as discovered might focus on teaching a single, authoritative narrative of the past.
Like, this is the story, memorize it.
Right. But a teacher with a constructivist view might emphasize analyzing primary sources.
To understand different perspectives and interpretations.
Exactly. They want students to grapple with the complexities of history and construct their own understanding.
So it's not just about what happened, but about how we know what happened.
And how our understanding of the past can change as we uncover new evidence or ask new questions.
Right. So these beliefs about knowledge really do shape the whole learning experience.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the content of what's being taught.
What else is there?
It also influences how teachers think about learning itself.
Like how students actually acquire knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are the different perspectives there?
Well, one common view is that learning is about transmission.
Transmission.
Yeah, like knowledge is being transmitted from the expert, the teacher, or the textbook.
To the student who's like a passive recipient.
Right. The focus is on memorization and getting the right answers.
Okay.
The other perspective is that learning is about construction.
Where the student is actively building their own understanding.
Exactly. This view emphasizes exploration, questioning, and making connections.
So the teacher is more of a guide or facilitator in this model.
Right. And the learning process is often more messy and iterative.
But also probably more engaging for the student, right?
Potentially, yeah. It can be more challenging, but also more rewarding.
Makes sense.
And, it's really fascinating how a teacher's beliefs about knowledge and learning are intertwined.
Like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. A teacher who sees knowledge as discovered and learning as transmission is likely to create a very different classroom environment than a teacher who has a constructivist view of both.
So it's not just one or the other. It's about how those beliefs work together.
Right. And some of the research even suggests that teachers might hold different views depending on the context.
What do you mean?
Well, this is where the idea of epistemological moves comes in.
Okay, this is a new one. What are epistemological moves?
Basically, they're the subtle ways that teachers direct students' attention to what counts as knowledge in a specific situation.
So it's like the teacher is saying, okay, in this context, here's how we figure things out.
Exactly. And those moves might change depending on the lesson or the activity.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So let's say a teacher is doing a science experiment.
Okay.
If they have a constructivist view, they might encourage students to come up with their own interpretations of the data.
To really think critically about what they're observing.
Right. But even a teacher who generally sees scientific knowledge as discovered might make an epistemological move in that moment to emphasize the importance of evidence-based reasoning.
So it's like they're adapting their approach to this specific learning goal.
Precisely. And it highlights that teachers aren't just robots following a script.
Right. They're making decisions in the moment about how to best guide student learning.
And those decisions are often influenced by their underlying beliefs about knowledge, even if they're not consciously aware of it.
That's really interesting. And this leads to another point that I found really fascinating in the research, this idea of a double standard when it comes to how teachers view knowledge in their discipline versus how they teach it in school.
Yeah, that's a really important one. So you might have a teacher who, completely understands the complexities of their field.
Like they get how knowledge is created and evolves in the real world.
Right. But then in the classroom, they present knowledge as a set of fixed facts.
So there's a disconnect between their own understanding and how they're teaching it to students.
Exactly. And it happens in all kinds of subjects.
Like how?
Well, you might have a science teacher who knows that scientific theories are constantly being tested and refined.
But then they teach science as if it's a set of unchanging laws.
Right. Or a history teacher who understands that historical interpretation is complex and nuanced.
But they still rely heavily on a single textbook to tell the story of the past.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, this is how experts understand it, but you just need to learn the basics.
Which kind of undermines the whole idea of critical thinking, doesn't it?
It can, yeah. And it raises questions about why this double standard exists.
What are some of the possible explanations?
Well, it could be about time constraints. Teachers often feel pressure to cover a lot of material in a short amount of time.
So they simplify things to make it more manageable.
Maybe. Or it could be about beliefs about student readiness.
Like, they think students need a foundation of basic facts before they can handle more complex ideas.
Possibly.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's just a matter of habit. They were taught this way, so they teach this way.
So it's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Right. But recognizing that this double standard exists is an important first step.
Absolutely. Now, let's circle back to calibration for a minute.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that it's about how well teachers understand their own knowledge. But how does that actually play out in the classroom?
Well, think about it this way. If a teacher overestimates their knowledge in a particular area, they might not explain things clearly.
Because they're assuming students understand things that they don't.
Exactly. Or they might dismiss student questions that challenge their understanding.
Because they think they already know everything.
Right. On the other hand, if a teacher underestimates their knowledge, they might avoid certain topics altogether.
Because they're afraid of being exposed as not knowing enough.
Exactly. And that can limit student learning.
So calibration is about finding that sweet spot where you're confident in your knowledge, but also aware of your limitations.
Yeah. And it's not always easy. Research shows that teachers, like everyone else, can have blind spots when it comes to their own understanding.
And sometimes more expertise can actually make calibration harder.
Right. Because experts can fall into the trap of thinking that everyone understands things the way they do.
Which can make it difficult to explain things to novices.
Exactly.
But luckily, calibration can be improved.
Yes, definitely. It's not a fixed trait.
So how do we help teachers become more calibrated?
Well, one way is through feedback.
Like getting feedback from colleagues or mentors on their teaching.
Yeah. And another important piece is reflection.
Encouraging teachers to really think critically about their own understanding and where they might have gaps.
Exactly. And there's even some evidence that a teacher's epistemic beliefs might influence their calibration.
Really?
Yeah, so teachers who have more sophisticated beliefs about knowledge,
Like they see it as complex, evolving, and constructed.
right, they might be better calibrated because they're more aware of the nuances of their subject matter.
So they're less likely to overestimate their own understanding.
Exactly.
This all points to the importance of addressing these epistemic issues in teacher education and professional development.
Absolutely. We need to give teachers the tools and support to really grapple with these fundamental questions about knowledge and learning.
Because ultimately, it's about creating more effective learning experiences for students.
Right. And it's not just about giving teachers more content knowledge.
What else is there?
It's about helping them develop a deeper understanding of what knowledge is and how it's created and shared.
So it's a more metacognitive approach to teaching.
Exactly.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways. First of all, teaching is not as straightforward as it might seem.
Right. There's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Teachers' beliefs about knowledge and learning have a profound impact on how they teach and how students learn.
Absolutely.
And understanding those beliefs can help us become more aware and effective learners ourselves.
It's a really empowering perspective.
And finally, this whole conversation raises a really big question.
Which is?
If we want to improve education, maybe we need to focus more on helping teachers develop their own epistemic sophistication.
That's a really provocative thought. Like, what would happen if we really prioritize that in teacher training and professional development?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, that's a deep dive for another day.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining me on this fascinating exploration. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.